Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams, in today's episode of Lawbreeze in Gentleland, the manufactured mob boss mannequin ghost-written gavel gargler Lawbriana Graham, the man slammed by Kendrick's jams, is now possibly exposed by Lil Wayne's son for never using his own pen since day one. Is it probable or possible that Wayne was pushing P, penning the flows of the frontliner of YMCMB since the days of the Carter 3? In this video, we'll peel the curtains back and truly see if the profuse promethazine promoter and the petty prom queen petition padre were committing penmanship perjury. But first, drop a like and subscribe for me.
Rose was the pen. When I mean a pen, he wrote the songs to so many songs that y'all are singing today that he's not on them. He's not on them. They're done by superstars.
And I won't speak on them.
We won't speak and we won't speak on them because we both have done such a thing. No face, no case.
Now, Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams, we got a lot to unpack in this video because not only will we be discussing what Lil Wayne's son has just revealed about Wayne and Drake's creative relationship, we will actually dig all the way back to the early days of when Wayne first signed Drake and dig to discover if there's any truth behind these crazy ghostwriting claims. We're also going to take a look at how Drake tried getting Kendrick Lamar's Toronto GNX shows cancelled, and we're going to dissect the comments of another one of Wayne's children, Regina Carter, and her thoughts on everybody hating on the Carter 6. So just like the collection of alleged ghostwriters that Drake keeps in the studio, we got a lot going on within this video, so get the popcorn, deteriorate those like and subscribe buttons, and let's break it all down. So it started when Lil Wayne's son, Lil Navi, was asked his thoughts on who is the greater artist, his father, Lil Wayne, or Wayne's protege, Drake. And this was his answer.
Who's better, Lil Wayne or Drake?
Lil Wayne. My dad wrote most of the shit, so I mean, on God, like if it wasn't for my pops, then it wouldn't be no Drake. Like for real. I mean, it probably would be a Drake, but he wouldn't be where he at now.
No, that's completely.
Wow, so you heard the man. He said that Wayne wrote most of Drake's music. Now, that's an extremely bold claim to make. And is there any validity to it? Well, we gotta look at a lot of factors and take it all the way back to the early days. I'm talking about like 2008 to really get the bigger picture here. But on a side note, is it not insane how much this kid looks exactly like his father? I mean, he's pursuing a legitimate rap career right now as well. Like, he's really trying to be the next Lil Wayne. So it's crazy. In about, 8 years, maybe we'll get another 2008 where Lil Navi, Wayne's son, will be running hip hop. And we know Wayne's kind of been mentoring him on this journey, right? Like Lil Navi was freestyling over Wayne's A Milli beat, and he even had a feature on the Carter 6. Song wasn't very good, and Wayne was saying some crazy stuff like, "That's my Lil Moolah, that's my son, he's my youngest. I told that guy get money, he done it. He take after me, I'm the big apple tree, and the apple don't fall too far from it. He's only 14, but that's nothing but numbers. He's effing your daughter, I'm effing your woman." I don't know if that's the right thing to be, teaching a 14-year-old kid, but he's obviously got Lil Navi in the booth helping him grow his rap career. Now, as far as if there's any validity to what Lil Navi's saying, I mean, again, right, this is the son of Lil Wayne, the man who did sign Drake and who worked with Drake very heavily early on in Drake's career. And there have been talks that Wayne wrote for Drake and that Drake wrote for Wayne. It was kind of like a back and forth collaborative effort. Now, first of all, again, we're going to look at both sides of the coin in terms of what incentive Lil Wayne's son would have to lie about this situation. Well, there's a couple things, right? First, of course, again, he's trying to be a famous rapper in and of himself. Making a bold statement like this about two of the biggest rappers in the game, Drake and Lil Wayne, brings a lot of eyeballs to Lil Navi that maybe his music hasn't been able to yet. Second, it's very possible that Drake and Wayne don't really get along at this point in time. And that's why Lil Navi doesn't feel obligated to speak highly of Drake to the public. I mean, we saw Drake was not on the Carter 6. Lil Navi was. We saw Drake didn't share the Carter 6 or any news of it on his Instagram, on any of his social media, but the same day he was sharing that his artist Smiley had a new album, and he was sharing his DMs with a Canadian politician who ended up going to see Kendrick's GNX show in Toronto. So we know he's very active on social media, right? The least he could have done is throw up a promotional post for the Carter 6. He used to wish Wayne a happy birthday in an Instagram post every year. He did not do so this year. We haven't seen him or Wayne linked together for a very long time, since around 2023 when they went on tour together. But around that same time, he also went on tour with J. Cole, and we know him and J. Cole are not on the best of terms right now as well. And on top of this, Wayne was mentioned in the knockout punch Not Like Us. Effed on Wayne's girl while he was in jail, that's conniving, then get his face tatted like a bee, apologizing. Wayne was indirectly dragged into this beef, and he was actually seen singing the lyrics to Not Like Us on stage at a performance a couple months later, and just basically denied that he even knew the song was a diss against Drake. He had said in that interview, "I went on stage and I was singing Not Like Us and they thought I was dissing. I didn't want my dude to be mad at me. I didn't even know it was Kendrick." In that same interview, he also emphasized that he might have not been the best fit for the Super Bowl, specifically because he doesn't have a polished image like Drake, saying, "I ain't Drake. I ain't out there smiling like that everywhere. I'm in the studio smoking and recording." Wayne also mentioned that despite Drake and Kendrick being at odds, he did speak to Kendrick personally about the Super Bowl, stating, "I spoken to him and I wished him all the best and told him he better kill it." So a whole lot of mixed responses here, right? That could be incentive for Lil Wayne's son to maybe take some information he might have heard, misconstrue it or exaggerate it, and make a bold claim like this that Wayne wrote all of Drake's tracks, right? Another reason could be, the kid is 14, right? You know that the younger generation is obsessed with rage baiting, trolling, clickbaiting, whatever the case is, and you know that children are impressionable. Maybe he heard something and took it out of context. Maybe Wayne had said, back for this project or that project, I had wrote so much for Drake. And then Lil Navi, his son, took that as, "Oh, my father was writing every Drake bar," right? I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying we're going to look at both sides of the sword, right? And play devil's advocate. Maybe this was just a young child taking something he heard out of context and exaggerating the truth, right? Maybe Drake wasn't actually getting ghost-written bars from Wayne throughout his entire career. Now, let's look at the opposite side of things, right? Could this be true? Could the majority of Drake's early career have been penned by Lil Wayne? Well, I would say if this was the case, it definitely stopped being the case, or Wayne stopped writing for Drake heavily around 2015 when both Drake and Wayne were trying to distance themselves from the Cash Money roster. See, Wayne in 2015 had sued Cash Money for $51 million, claiming that Birdman was withholding the profits of Wayne's own music, Drake's music, and Nicki's music, not paying the proper royalties to Young Money. Wayne said that he wanted off the label, nothing to do with them, and that they were withholding the Carter 5. Around the same time, Drake was attempting to leave the label by dropping project after project to fulfill his contract, and he kind of got into a little bit of a jam when trying to do that. So his first 3 projects, Thank Me Later, Take Care, Nothing Was the Same, all studio albums on Cash Money, Young Money. However, then he put out in 2015, If You're Reading This Is Too Late, and What a Time to Be Alive with Future. Now, these are just rumors here, but according to some industry insiders, I believe Poetic Flacco had reported on this, Drake had signed initially a 5-album deal with Young Money, so that would mean he fulfilled his contract, right? Thank Me Later, Take Care, Nothing Was the Same, If You're Reading This, and What a Time to Be Alive, that's 5 projects. But Birdman said, nah, you're following through. If You're Reading This and What a Time to Be Alive in 2015, those were mixtapes, right? Those weren't full-fledged projects, and that's why we then saw Drake on the Cash Money label with Views and Scorpion, because Scorpion would actually mark the official 5th studio album from Drake and would fully fulfill his contract. Now, why I say 2015 was the time where Wayne and Drake probably distanced themselves creatively and collaboratively. Well, that's because, again, both of them were trying to leave the label. Wayne was basically held hostage. He couldn't release the Carter 5 until he settled his lawsuit with Cash Money, and Drake was actively trying to leave. And around that point, we stopped seeing Drake and Wayne collaborate as much. But it was around that same time that we did see Drake work heavily with other writers. Of course, we saw him work with PARTYNEXTDOOR, but the biggest bombshell of all was Quentin Miller, who had penned several tracks off of If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Future had also penned a couple songs for Drake, including Feel No Ways, but this is all public information, right? They have writing credits, or in the case of Quentin Miller, all this stuff was exposed, the reference tracks were leaked. We know Drake has a history of using ghostwriters. That's why this bombshell Navi dropped is kind of believable, because, yeah, Drake and Wayne were working together a lot early on. Is it out of the realm of possibilities Wayne was penning Drake's songs? Not completely. So, what do we know? Well, firstly, Drake has obviously evolved his rapping style a lot over the years, right? And throughout every era, he kind of takes key influence from certain major players. So at the beginning, he was rapping like Joe Budden. Then, after the mixtape days, he started rapping and taking more influence from Kanye West. Then, once he signed to Young Money, he was doing these very punchline-heavy flows, these auto-tune-heavy hooks and deliveries, the moody, stretched-out vocals on songs like Money to Blow or November 18th. mirror a lot of Wayne's syrup-infused auto-tune crooning from that era. Drake's bars like "Swimming in the Money, Come and Find Me," "Nemo" were direct spins off Wayne's earlier bars like "You Drop 'em 'cause we pop 'em," like Orville Redenbacher. The influence was very obvious there. There were also direct instances of Drake completely taking Lil Wayne lines from old songs and using them in new verses, like this one. Or this one.
I got your dream girl riding in your dream car. Got your dream girl riding in your dream car.
Or taking Wayne lines even when he was collaborating with Wayne on songs like "Every Girl in the World."
She wants me, she wants me, she wants me, she wants me. Tell me what you don't see. Tell me what you don't see.
Nah, you might be saying, alright, but Rapaholics, like, Drake was signed to Wayne, right? Obviously, Wayne was cool with Drake, taking a couple lines as inspiration for some new verses that Wayne had already spit. And that's cool and all, but remember when Drake first came in the game and he was signed to Wayne, what was his first breakout hit? Do you remember it? I definitely do, because as a Canadian, it was very incredible to witness this massive moment in 2009 of a Canadian rapper finally getting some massive global attention, hearing this Canadian song all across the radio. I was very proud. It was Best I Ever Had. The song hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, and again, this is a massive look because it's Drake's first hit. Imagine like your first hit coming into the game, almost cracking the number 1 spot on the Billboard charts. The song was so big, Kanye West was even demanding that he executive produce the music video for it. And Wayne was obviously very happy, right? Like, this was the first artist off of his record label, Young Money, to fully take off into superstardom. That's putting a lot of cash in Wayne's pocket. And he even rapped on the song Money to Blow, which is an important song we'll touch on shortly. He said, "We're going to be all right if we put Drake on every hook." And that seemed to be the case. But what if I told you that Wayne was actually responsible for the pen behind Drake's first breakout hit, Best I Ever Had? See, in 2008, a song leaked on a mixtape called "Do It For The Boy" by Lil Wayne and Kid Kid. On the hook of that song, Wayne rapped, "Shawty, let your hair down, I'ma let the top down, we can ride around town, turn this beat to our town, we can do it real big, bigger than you ever done it, everything you ever wanted, I could spend whatever on it." About a year later, you get the song Best I Ever Had with the Drake hook where he sings, "Shawty, you're my everything, you're all I ever wanted, we can do it real big, bigger than you ever done it." Singing it in the exact same melody Wayne used on "Do It For The Boy" and taking multiple of the same bars. Later on the hook, Wayne was rapping, "And I'm a mother effing beast, yes I'm a beast, yes I'm a beast, now girl gon' do it for the boy, do it for the boy." And Drake took the exact same cadence to sing his hook, "You're the best I ever had, the best I ever had." It was the exact same formula with some of the exact same lines that were used on Drake's breakout hit that originally stemmed from a Lil Wayne song. But there's an added layer to this because it wasn't actually Wayne who wrote the hook of this track. It was another artist by the name of Kia Shine. So Kia Shine had detailed this story on various occasions and had even fought to receive royalties off of Drake's hit Best I Ever Had once it blew up. So as far as him and Wayne's relationship, he says Wayne is a great dude. He's known him since 2002. He said him and Wayne kept the relationship and they had linked up in the studio during the mixtape era in around 2007, 2008. And Kia Shine had played Lil Wayne a song where he's rapping on the hook, "We could do it real big, bigger than you ever done it, so just do it for the boy, do it for the boy." Of course, Wayne had taken that hook for his own song, "Do It For The Boy," and then Drake sampled that for Best I Ever Had. Now, Kia Shine said Drake kind of gave him problems at first with trying to get his proper credit as a writer on Best I Ever Had because he was new to the game and he didn't really understand the business side of, when you're sampling a record. Wayne might have rapped it, but it initially came from this artist, Kia Shine. So Kia Shine now needs a writing credit on Best I Ever Had, even though Drake thought he was just sampling it from Lil Wayne. It was a direct interpolation. He copied the words, the cadence, the flow, the melody, everything. Kia Shine had spoke on it again, saying, "Basically, I did a record for Lil Wayne called Do It For The Boy. I gave Wayne the joint back in March of 2008. Drake sampled the melody, some of the words, the cadence, etc. We were able to settle at 25% of the Best I Ever Had publishing." Then Drake spoke on it saying, "I have never met Kia Shine or worked with him. I wrote the entire composition in Toronto and I borrowed one line from a Lil Wayne song that he had produced the beat for. The claims of 25% ownership are false, and for an artist to brag about splits on a song is distasteful to begin with." So obviously Drake didn't know that Kia Shine had actually written that song for Wayne. He thought he just produced the beat. Now, around that same time of March 2008, when Kia Shine gives Lil Wayne the hook for Do It For The Boy, Wayne also releases his number 1 hit, Lollipop. And Drake on a song called From Florida With Love had detailed being around Wayne at that time, rapping "Rest in Peace to Static," yelling "Shawty want a thug," "Bottles in the club," "You know I love to touch." Wayne played that stuff for me and Kobe on the bus. And the timeline gets a little blurry as to when Drake actually met Wayne. Everyone kind of tells the story different, and it's important because the timeline kind of gives key detail into whether or not Wayne was actually writing for Drake. See, Drake has a song on So Far Gone called November 18th, and that is the date Drake claims he met Lil Wayne. Now, was that November 18th, 2007 or 2008? Because Lollipop was released months before in March of 2008, and Drake on this record is claiming that he was there before the Carter 3 came out, when Wayne was playing Lollipop for Kobe Bryant on his tour bus. Drake had said, "I flew to Houston and, I went on the bus and Wayne was getting the biggest tattoo bleeding out with the black ink. I was like, this is crazy." And then I remember just sitting there and I'm looking up and Kobe Bryant walks on the bus to get his Carter 3 iPod because he wanted to get the album early. But at the same time, the timelines are kind of weird because Jazz Prince, the guy who discovered Drake, and Lil Wayne both recount a story of Jazz Prince playing Lil Wayne Drake's freestyle to a milli, and that's when Wayne discovered Drake and wanted to sign him. But a milli was also only released around the same time as Lollipop. But here you have Drake saying that he was around for the Lollipop days in March of 2008. So you have to assume the November 18th song that Drake named after the day Lil Wayne discovered him was actually November 18th, 2007, not 2008. Why this is interesting is because another key instance of Wayne and Drake using each other's bars was on the song Money to Blow. Now that song officially released in 2009, but it was leaked on a Drake mixtape in early 2008. And in September of 2008, Lil Wayne performed at the MTV Music Video Awards, and over the beat of his song Misunderstood, he rapped word for word the same exact verse from Drake's song Money to Blow. He also capped off his performance by yelling, "Drizzy Drake, I love you, boy." Now, I can't play this for copyright reasons, but you guys can go look it up yourself. Again, the song only officially released in 2009, and Drake had stated he met Wayne on November 18th. And here you have Wayne in September of 2008 rapping a Drake verse and yelling, "Drake, I love you." That, combined with the fact that Drake was around when Wayne was still recording the Carter 3 in 2008, shows that that November 18th date was probably 2007. Why that plays an important role in this story is because 2007 was the year that Drake released his mixtape Comeback Season, and after that was when he started rapping exactly like Wayne. Go look at songs like Ransom, Ignorant Stuff, Uptown. These were all collaborations with Wayne where Drake is rapping exactly like Wayne. And you also have Wayne rapping Drake's Money to Blow verse word for word before the song was ever actually officially released. So you gotta wonder who actually wrote that verse, right? Was it Drake writing it for Wayne, or was it Wayne writing it for Drake? The hook on that song too sounds exactly like something Lil Wayne would have rapped. And it's hard to tell because, of course, on the official version of Money to Blow, Wayne had his own verse on the track. So looking at the writing credits, of course you're going to see Lil Wayne there because he had his own verse. We don't know if he also had a writing credit for Drake's verse or for the hook. Another interesting kind of reversal of the roles here is the fact that when Wayne was in Rikers Island prison in 2010, he released an album called I'm Not a Human Being. Actually, on No Ceilings, his mixtape a couple months prior, it featured a song called I'm Single. Now, everything about this song sounded like a Drake track. From the laid-back, dark, moody instrumentals produced by Drake's right-hand producer, 40, to the bars Wayne is singing about, basking in his loneliness. The stripped-back, slowed, sing-songy, rapping, hybrid type delivery of all the bars on this song, this sounds like it could have been a Drake track, right? And as Wayne is gearing up to drop I'm Not a Human Being 1 while he's incarcerated, you get the track list, which shows that the song I'm Single would be on it, but it says featuring Drake. When we got the album, Drake was not on it. Again, it was produced by his right-hand guy. Wayne sounded like Drake. It said it was featuring Drake, but you couldn't hear Drake on it. Literally 15 years later, throughout the Kendrick and Drake beef, this went under the rug, but the reference track of the song actually leaked, where Drake was singing and rapping the entire song in full, word for word. So that's why it makes sense that the track list said featuring Drake, because likely what was about to happen was either Drake wrote this song for Wayne or Wayne wrote this song for Drake. They both performed the entire song in full, and it was supposed to be Wayne does one verse, Drake does the other, right? But somehow Drake's part got left off. It was just Wayne, and we'd hear the reference track leak years later. On that same album, you have the song With You with Drake and Lil Wayne, where Drake is performing the hook, but the last time the hook rolls around, it's actually Wayne performing it. So you're getting this confusing cycle of Wayne rapping Drake's bars, Drake rapping Wayne's bars. But as far as who's actually writing these bars, well, that's up in the air. The only thing we know factually is that Kia Shine had wrote a song for Wayne that Drake later flipped for Best I Ever Had. Now, then we get to Drake's first album, Thank Me Later, which Drake says was very much orchestrated by the label. He said that was the first album and last album that the label had a major hand in. Wayne was actually listed as an executive producer of the album. He had a feature as well. It's safe to say he had a pretty big hand in it, but I would say if Wayne was writing for Drake, this is where it stopped, around 2010 with Thank Me Later. Because once 2011 rolled around and Drake dropped Take Care, his sound had evolved drastically and taken a lot of inspiration from the underground scene within Toronto, most notably The Weeknd, who had given up several of his own songs from his debut project House of Balloons that Drake literally just sang over, the same way Lil Wayne did with I'm Single, and he put them on Take Care. And by this time period, the way Drake was rapping sounded nothing like Wayne, right? Like, go listen to Headlines, The Motto, Club Paradise. None of these songs really sounded like Wayne wrote them. The perspective doesn't sound like Wayne. The melodies don't really sound like Wayne. There's no more punchlines. Drake at this point was taking a lot more off of The Weeknd than he was off Wayne. But 2009, 2010, So Far Gone and Thank Me Later definitely take a lot of Wayne's style. Even on Take Care, there are glimpses of this, like the song Underground Kings, where Drake interpolates a Wayne track rapping, walking like a man, finger on the trigger, got money in my pocket, I'm a uptown guy. That is an exact quote from a Lil Wayne track, Neck of the Woods, that Drake just spun for his own track, Underground King. But that was an interpolation, right? The same way on Practice, he interpolated Juvenile's song, Back That Thing Up. If you listen to the song Make Me Proud off of Take Care, that's the only one I hear there that sounds like it could have been written by Wayne. The hook kind of sounds like something Wayne would have rapped. So that's more from like an overall sonics or song structure perspective. Like the bars themselves sound exactly like that typical simpy sensitive Drake, and that was never really an attitude Wayne embodied, right? Like a woman with a future and a past, a little attitude problem, probably all good, it'll make the stuff last. Wayne wasn't rapping that. He was rapping, she got that good, she Michael Jackson bad, I'm attracted to her for her attractive butt. That was the last time we really got glimpses of Drake embodying that, you know, typical Wayne cadence on a song. Once Nothing Was the Same rolled around, Wayne wasn't even featured on it. Drake was rapping on the intro, I'm just as famous as my mentor, but that's still the boss, don't get sent for. And then again, once 2015 rolled around, we got the next Drake project. If you're reading this, that was him making an active effort to leave the label, and he was already working with different writers from Quentin Miller to PARTYNEXTDOOR, etc. I think between the years of 2008 to 2010, Drake was definitely, at the very least, taking a lot of inspiration from Wayne. He stopped rapping like Joe Budden in 2007, started rapping like Lil Wayne, and you could make the argument based off all the different cases we went through that, yeah, maybe Wayne was penning a couple verses, a couple hooks, or even full songs for Drake in that era. Once Take Care rolled around, I think Drake went on to use different ghostwriters like The Weeknd, and then later PND and Quentin Miller. But in that 2008-2010 era, when Wayne might have had a big presence on Drake's penmanship, there was also another artist in the picture who gets far less than enough credit he deserves. An artist by the name of Nicholas F. And there's a very interesting Reddit post on, ironically, the Dark Kenny Reddit. And they dug into Drake's ghostwriting past and found out the big involvement this guy had and the lack of credit that he got. So, essentially, Nicholas F., a Virginia-born artist who collaborated with Drake on his debut mixtape Room for Improvement, the follow-up mixtape Comeback Season, and finally his breakout project, So Far Gone. So, he was working with Drake all the way back in 2006. In a 2010 interview with Complex, when he was asked if he ever ghostwritten for Drake, Nicholas F. responded, "Yeah, I've done that. I know the rumor going around. I don't want anything I say to be misconstrued. I helped out, you know?" Nicholas F. is also credited on multiple Drake songs, including the third lead single on So Far Gone, I'm Going In, which ironically also features Lil Wayne. Drake has described Nicholas F. as one of the most gifted people I know at finding flows. OVO Hush is another collaborator of Drake. Hush has a writing credit on 61% of Take Care, and Nothing Was the Same, 22 out of 36 songs. And again, this is the era where I've been telling you guys, I think Drake stopped working with Wayne as heavily, and if Wayne was writing for Drake, it was around the Take Care era where that stopped. Now, they continue saying, we never see any more credits from Hush after Nothing Was the Same. An article claims Hush is known as Hush because he's paid hush money. Drake goes on to list Hush as one of his top 5 favorite rappers of all time, and that's a very high ranking for someone who only has 3 songs on YouTube from 2009. Hush is still a member to this day of OVO. The most interesting ghostwriter is Kenza Samir, a poet who recently released her poetry book with Drake called Titles Ruin Everything, along with his album For All the Dogs. She's credited on 20 plus songs spanning from Take Care to Scorpion. In an interview, the Toronto poet Kenza Samir helped Drake write the song Connect from Nothing Was the Same. She recalled, when I texted him, isn't it amazing how you talk all that crap and we still lack communication? Drake was like, are you talking to me about me right now, or is that for the song? So as you can see, right, like even though Drake stopped working with Wayne, and Wayne likely didn't have much involvement in Drake's writing after 2011, Drake was still using ghostwriters year after year. I actually have a full video coming out of every time Drake has stolen another artist's song, but as far as ghostwriters are concerned, I mean, we saw as recently as 2022 when Drake was using Lil Yachty for multiple reference tracks from Jumbotron Poppin' to Back Outside Boys. We saw him use Vori to make the reference track for the song Mob Ties in 2018. PARTYNEXTDOOR had multiple reference tracks for Drake, from songs like Ratchet Happy Birthday to Legend off of If You're Reading This Is Too Late. Of course, Quentin Miller wrote like half the songs off If You're Reading This Is Too Late, allegedly. Nicholas F., who doesn't get enough credit, was around all the way back in 2006 for the mixtape days. Then Hush, who is still on OVO, was credited to write for Drake from Take Care to Nothing Was the Same. And then from Nothing Was the Same to Scorpion, you had the Toronto poet Kenza Samir helping Drake's out with tracks like Connect. The only time period here that Drake isn't linked to a ghostwriter is the 2008 to 2010 era, where again, he's rapping like Wayne, he's rapping with Wayne, he's signed to Wayne. Wayne is heavily involved in all his projects, even executive producing his first album. So is it out of the realm of possibilities that Wayne had a hand in writing a lot of the songs or some of the songs off that project? And off So Far Gone? Not completely. There's various examples I gave you guys in this video showing that they collaborated quite heavily. Now, does this mean Wayne was Drake's ghostwriter or wrote all his songs like Wayne's son Lil Novi is claiming? Not exactly, right? Because there's a lot of back and forth examples where sometimes you hear Drake write a reference track for Wayne. Sometimes you hear Wayne rap a Drake verse before it's even released. Sometimes you hear Drake interpolate a Wayne song. It's kind of hard to tell who's actually writing what. Or if it's an instance of, sometimes Wayne would write a song for Drake, sometimes Drake would write a song for Wayne. There was even an interview Drake did all the way back in 2006 where the interviewer was asking him about rumors that he had been writing for Cash Money, obviously the record label that Wayne was signed to at the time. And Drake had answered saying, that interview is like 4 years old. At the time, I was probably working on my own project. When I was young, I was working with a lot of people being out in the South. My uncle wrote for Al Green and I was around Al a lot. Cash Money, Yo Gotti, that just came about from me being in Memphis. It was just little affiliations I had, but I know that interview is old. The interview he's referencing is one where it says that Drake had written for some of today's top hitmakers like Cash Money and Yo Gotti. And Drake even referenced this on 2022 song Rich Flex, where he said, I used to roll with CMG. CMG is Yo Gotti's record label. So it seems like way back in 2006, Drake, through his affiliation with Al Green and being out in Memphis with his father, had been connected to Cash Money and Yo Gotti and potentially did some work with them, but there's no direct mention here of Lil Wayne, right? Just that Drake had written for Cash Money in 2006. So that was an interesting rabbit hole that Lil Wayne's son took us down. It's time to get into a rabbit hole that his daughter has now taken the internet down. Now, we just touched on the glory days of Lil Wayne, the Carter 3 days, but we're not in the brightest of times right now as Wayne fans with the Carter 6, unfortunately. It's been quite a disappointment. But his daughter, who seems to be his number one fan, and I love that for her, I love that for him. Like, she should root for him no matter what, no matter how many elephant sounds he's got on his latest project. But we do have to be realistic here with our criticisms, right? Like, I'm a big Wayne fan. I grew up on the Carter 2, the Carter 3. He is probably my GOAT just because of the sheer influence he had on the artists I grew up with, the impact he had on my childhood, and the unprecedented run he had with his mixtapes, his features, and his commercial success throughout the late 2000s. But 2025 is a much different story. The internet, as you guys probably know, have been trashing the Carter 6. So Reginae had something to say. she's basically chalking it up to the fact that music nowadays is very reliant on formulaic little sound bites that will go viral on TikTok. And she thinks, that's what kind of defines a hit or defines a great song in 2025, especially for the youth, right? She's chalking it up to the fact that Wayne was making songs more for soundtracks, for movies, for sporting events, for video games, cinematic, larger-than-life productions. Check out what she had to say.
You said Party 6 is trash. That's fine. That's what you want to say. But let me tell you something about my father and Party 6. This is what I hate about you kids. The fact that y'all can get on TikTok and do a dance to it, that don't mean that it's trash, babe. Okay? The fact that you can't get on TikTok and do a little 1-2 little viral moment for it, that don't mean that it's trash, babe. My dad was talking real shit. It's stuff on that album that you can hear in 2K, in games, at malls, at all type of stuff. It's universal, my love. Y'all need to take y'all minds out of the TikTok world and get to the real bag. Whereas my dad is a lyricist, babe. My dad really talks shit. So if you can't understand it, please move silent like the GM lasagna and get the out of here. Thanks. Now that's my last song. Because I already said that I'm not about to be cussing because y'all already heard me cussing crazy. And y'all was like, wait a minute.
I gotta say, I understand some of the points she's making, but I highly disagree. First of all, it's not the kids who are criticizing this album, right? Like, those elephant trunk horns can go viral on TikTok. That is literally the definition of outlandish, crazy music that can capture a viral moment on social media. That's not what the complaint is about, right? And a lot of these bars, too, they're so outlandish and insane that they could definitely go viral on social media. The problem is for the actual, diehard Wayne fans who have been around for the last 10, 20 years, right? The ones who are now in their 30s and 40s who are looking for Wayne to mature in his subject matter. Yeah, you could say, okay, these songs are tailored for sporting events, for movie soundtracks, whatever, right? He's got Bono on there. He's got Jelly Roll on there. Those songs do sound like they're pop-ready hits made for the radio, made for soundtracks, whatever the case is. It doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean Wayne is rapping at an elite level on them, right? And if you're going to say, okay, well, Wayne has been rapping about a lot of the same subject matter for at least the last 10 years, you can't really expect him to evolve like a Jay-Z and make his own version of a 444. That's fine. Wayne doesn't necessarily need to mature in his subject matter, but if he's going to come in with the same wacky punchlines, the plays on words, the metaphors, whatever the case is, you got to at least keep them on the same level as they were at during the Carter 4 days, during the Sorry for the Wait days. And that's not even Wayne's prime, right? If you really want to talk about Wayne rapping at an elite level, you got to go back to the Carter 2. You got to look at the Drought 3s, the No Ceilings. I actually agree with Akademiks on his take in that a lot of the best Wayne music was either leaked or on mixtapes, and a lot of the mixtape sites are no longer around. So if you're looking to find prime Wayne, it's very hard. You got to do digging on the internet. And a lot of hip-hop fans today are not necessarily doing that digging to figure out who the greatest artists were or when the greatest runs were in hip-hop, right? You had to really be there for that. Does that mean Wayne's music aged badly? Not necessarily, because if you find those tracks, Something You Forgot, Me and My Drank, Cry Out, I can name 1,000 leaked or mixtape Wayne songs, and they defined the next generation, right? The Young Thugs, Lil Uzis, Tylers, Drakes, Kendricks even. Like, all these guys are rapping off a blueprint that Wayne concocted. But a couple of the main problems are that A, Wayne is no longer rapping like that today at that level, and B, a lot of these songs you can't really find unless you dig hard for them. And the songs he's creating today that, Regine is saying are meant for soundtracks, meant for NBA games, whatever the case is, like, these songs sound dated as hell, right? That Bono song sounds like it was recorded in 2011 because it was recorded in 2011. Bono gave him that hook, and that beat was produced by Red One, like the producer of Akon songs and Just Dance by Lady Gaga, like 2008 tracks, right? Like, these are producers who were massive. Their sound was massive in the early 2010s. This song sounds like it was meant for the early 2010s. There's not enough evolution in Wayne's content right now to justify this being anything more than a very lackluster, disappointing project. And if he didn't name it the Carter 6, it wouldn't be receiving the flack that it is. But the Carter is a renowned hip-hop series, possibly the best series in hip-hop history, and definitely the best-selling series in hip-hop history. All in all the albums combined equal about over 20 million albums worth in sales. Even the Carter 5 had Wayne delivering a lot of maturity and vulnerability in his music, right? Songs like Let It All Work Out, Open Letter, storytelling songs like Mona Lisa, these were elite Wayne records. So there's no excuse for the Carter 6 to be as lackluster as it is. And I understand this is Wayne's daughter, right? And she's entitled to her opinion, and it makes sense that she's defending her father, but it's time for Wayne to stop having so many yes men around him, right? It's time for someone to tell him he needs to either evolve or get a better executive producer in there so that they can structure the songs for him. They can get some better hook writers in there. They can make sure that his verses aren't going to waste with repetitive deliveries or bad beats. I mean, even a lot of these songs off the Carter 6 could have been stronger if you eliminated one of the verses or you stopped Wayne from repeating the hook so many times in this slurred out, mumbly, auto-tune drenched delivery, right? A lot of these songs could have been shortened. A lot of them could have been scrapped. A lot of reasons why the Carter 6 could have been a much better project. And again, I understand this is Wayne's family, but it's time for him to have some better people on his team to guide him into leveraging his skill set at a higher level. Because again, he can still rap his crack off. It's just off the backbone of trash, right? Like the subject matter is trash. There's no inspiration. The beats are horrible. There's not a hook or a message or a vocal delivery that really stands out here. It just sounds like a lot of noise. But you want to know what else sounds like a lot of noise? The sound of the crowd at Kendrick's 2 nights in Toronto for his Stadium GNX tour. This has been absolutely monumental. I have tons of videos documenting Kendrick's time in Canada. You guys can check them out. But what we got to look at is an insane article by a reporter who was at the concert, who interviewed some Torontanians, some Toronto citizens, and who got some inside scoop on how Drake was trying to shut down the entire concert from even happening. So let's take a look at what went down here. So the article starts off saying, on 2001's Ola Ovito, a standout cut from Jay-Z's The Blueprint album, he declared that if he wasn't better than his late close friend B.I.G., he was the closest one. On the North American leg of Kendrick and SZA's massively successful GNX tour, as it near its end, it's time to say the same thing about the Compton MC. Placing Kendrick's resume in context, and after witnessing the highly anticipated Toronto show in person, it's not audacious to say he is close to being the greatest. Yet, before getting into the logistics of why that holds weight, one must understand the moment that stood in front of Kendrick. His Super Bowl halftime show and Drake's lawsuit against UMG over the smash hit Not Like Us are still in litigation. And yes, there's no denying what the last year has done for Kendrick Lamar's career, and to keep it a buck, Drake's too. So right off the bat, they're saying that Kendrick can now make a claim for the greatest of all time. Drop a comment if you guys agree. Hours before Thursday's show at the Rogers Centre, I sat at Gabby's, a quaint restaurant a stone's throw away from the Toronto Blue Jays Stadium. Kendrick has always valued Toronto as a tour destination, but the conversation revolved around what Drake meant to Toronto. F Drake. Yeah, he's had hit records, but you're a joke. I hope Kendrick embarrasses the F out of him tonight, said a bartender named Melissa that I spoke to in Toronto. Her coworker, Travis, co-signed her sentiment. All that rapping Toronto stuff is fake. I hope Kendrick does Not Like Us 100 times and it keeps Drake up at night. Yeah, so here, this is exactly what I've been saying, right? Like, as a Canadian, it's not all Canadians that glaze Drake, right? Like, a lot of us understand, yes, he's done massive monumental things as a Toronto artist, right? I was saying it earlier in this video. When I heard Best I Ever Had on the radio, I was super excited to know that a Canadian just like me, who grew up in a similar household to me, was now making massive waves within hip-hop and had the highest charting hip-hop hit a Canadian had ever seen. But that was very early on, and throughout his entire career, not only has he not put on any other Toronto artists, unless I guess you could say The Weeknd and PARTYNEXTDOOR, but in terms of hip-hop, look at all that Wayne did for him and for the rest of Young Money. Drake has not done a fraction of that for artists under his umbrella, specifically Canadian artists, when he had so many opportunities to do so. And over the years, his music has gotten extremely repetitive, generic, stale, shallow, formulaic. Meanwhile, Kendrick here is raising and elevating the bar. And that's why, as a Canadian, a fan of hip-hop, first and foremost, it doesn't matter where Drake is from. It doesn't matter what he himself has gained. As a Canadian, you're still looking at it from the grander perspective of this is hip-hop, right? And you got to keep raising the bar. Drake has not been doing that. It's been Kendrick. And of course, as he was gearing up to do GNX in the Rogers Centre in Toronto, we knew that this would be one more stop in the massive victory lap he's been taking ever since this beef kicked off in 2024. So the article continues. The reality of what these bartenders in Toronto said lies somewhere in the middle. What Drake has done for Toronto from an outside perspective can't be understated. For better or worse, according to several Toronto residents, he is the foremost recognizable representative for the city on an international stage. Despite everything, Drake remains the greatest hitmaker in rap history. Given the sheer volume of chart-topping numbers, there's no way to refute what he's delivered or helped deliver to others. And he's clearly got enough pull to make Canadian politicians, like the former head of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, publicly apologize on social media for attending the GNX show. And yeah, there's no denying any of this, right? Like, Drake is a massive hitmaker. Drake is a staple for Toronto. Drake himself, through his shows, through whatever the case is, brings in revenue, tons of it, millions of dollars for the city of Toronto every single year. There's no denying that. But what have you done to actually elevate Toronto hip-hop at this point, right? What have you done to elevate hip-hop as a whole in the last decade? What have you done to elevate anybody but yourself? And then as far as the politician, I already touched on that in a prior video. This politician attended Kendrick's show and then publicly apologized for it after Drake exposed his messages with him, calling him a goof, and the politician had said that he was only there to see SZA. Absolutely ridiculous, but they continue. This is the sort of anxiety and intensity that permeated the air before, during, and certainly after the show. It's why both nights felt like such a line in the sand moment, because in many ways, they were. The city may appreciate Drake's decade-long dominance, but blind loyalty doesn't exist either. On stage, though, Kendrick and SZA's chemistry is irrefutable. In back-and-forth sets, both artists commanded the lore and adoration of fans who came to see them. SZA garnered her decibel-breaking moments, further cementing herself as the foremost R&B artist of the decade. Her role and importance on the tour was clear. She is the yin to Kendrick's yang, but their creative affinity is why the tour has overachieved in the manner it has thus far. When Kendrick handed the baton off to SZA and vice versa, a beacon of pride resonated in knowing the show wouldn't have a drop-off. An added sense of intensity and flavor arrived in ways that never allowed monotony to creep in. As SZA went through a stream of her hits, many of which drew massive reactions from the sold-out crowd, there were perhaps none bigger than her appearance on Rich Baby Daddy. The irony on which being Drake's song was lost on no one. I find that hilarious that she performs Rich Baby Daddy, where the lyrics go, shake that butt for Drake, now shake that butt for me, on this tour where Kendrick closes it out with Not Like Us. But anyways, they continue. But everyone there understood that night was about Kendrick and how he would perform on his greatest enemy's home turf. According to sources, attempts by Drake's camp to have both tour shows cancelled or postponed allegedly took place in hopes of booking Ovi Ho Fest. However, by then, paperwork with the Rogers Centre had already been filed, and no other venue in the city could hold the same capacity. That's crazy, right? So what they're implying here is that, according to sources, Drake's camp had tried to get the GNX tour canceled in Toronto by saying, hey, let me do the Ovi Ho Fest in the Rogers Centre, and that way, you don't need Kendrick and SZA coming. I'll bring in a bunch of hip-hop acts. We'll have a big hip-hop moment for Toronto, but it'll be on my watch, right? He knew how bad of a look it would be for Kendrick to come to Toronto 2 nights in a row at the biggest stadium in the city to perform Not Like Us. And the funny part is the Rogers Centre knew there's no bigger venue that they could perform at, so they had to let them perform at this stadium. It'll be funny to see after they, rejected Drake's request to cancel the GNX show, if Drake even ends up doing Ovi Ho Fest at the Rogers Centre. But they continue. Ultimately, the best that could happen was a stream with Drake and Kai Cenat, which also fell through. Though universally known in Toronto sports circles for his close affiliation with the Raptors, Drake's relationship with the Blue Jays is cordial at best. And again, the Blue Jays play in the Rogers Centre, right? The Raptors play, I believe, in the Scotiabank Arena, which is a smaller venue than the one Kendrick performed at. So Drake doesn't really have a lot of pull with the Rogers Centre, and that's why he couldn't get the show canceled. Part of Drake's 2011 Headlines video was filmed at the Rogers Centre, and the artwork to his 2015 Meek Mill diss back-to-back featured Blue Jays legend Joe Carter's 1993 walk-off World Series home run. Aside from that, his presence at Blue Jays games isn't well documented, so when the request to cancel the GNX show came in from Drake's team, the team and the stadium didn't feel much of a need to try and honor it, because it wasn't as if the bond was ever that strong to begin with. And again, insane, right? Like, Drake has enough pull with these politicians in Canada to make them apologize for attending the show, but when it comes to actually asking the stadium to cancel it, which allegedly Drake's team tried to do, He doesn't have enough pull there to get the show canceled because they knew there wasn't a big enough stadium other than the Rogers Center for Kendrick and SZA to perform at. And they did so 2 nights in a row, performing for over 100,000 people, which is 3% of the Toronto population. Absolutely insane. And I have 2 whole videos breaking the entire show down. It was historic. I didn't personally go see it, but just by the clips, especially Euphoria, when he performs that song with all the fires and all that, like, out of this world. Highly suggest you guys check it out. But let me know what you guys think about all this, and I will catch you in the next one.